There's a desolate, craggy mountain peak piercing the perpetually clouded skies of the Pacific Northwest miles from any hiking trail or human settlement. Its jagged silhouette is often obscured by churning fog and relentless drizzle, and the keel? Silence here is absolute broken, only by the mournful shriek of the wind through ancient rock formations. Indigenous legends, whispered only among the oldest and most remote. Tribal elders speak of it as the Twisted Eye, a place with a very firmament listens and where looking too long at the stars could unravel your soul. Crowned atop this ominous summit sit the crumbling, rust-eaten ruins of the Stargazers Peak Observatory, a massive experimental astronomical facility, active for only a few short years in the late 1960s. It was designed to house a unique, proprietary cosmic array reportedly capable of detecting frequencies far beyond the known electromagnetic spectrum. The observatory was abandoned abruptly in 1972 following an unexplained mass disappearance of its core research staff in a chilling cryptic final log entry. Reality is no longer consistent. The parallax is everywhere. The eye has opened. The official story cited catastrophic structural failure and extreme weather, but hushed fragmented reports from the few surviving support personnel spoke of visual distortions, objects appearing in impossible places, and a profound, unnerving sensation that the very universe around the peak was subtly, terrifyingly rearranging itself. Stargazer's Peak became a forgotten monument to scientific hubris, its existence eventually relegated to the realm of obscure, discredited astrophysics papers and chilling government black sites. This story begins with Dr. Lena Petrova, a 39-year-old brilliant but disgraced theoretical physicist and cognitive neuroscientist from CERN. Lena wasn't interested in ghost stories or conspiracy theories. She was a scientist utterly consumed by the nature of perception, the subjective reality of the human mind, and the profound ways external stimuli, particularly exotic energy fields, could warp or reshape consciousness. Stargazer's Peak to her represented the ultimate horrifying case study. She'd unearthed fragmented research notes and encrypted low-level military intelligence reports from the early 1970s that hinted at cosmic dislocations and localized ontological instability reported by this observatory staff phenomena that defied all known physics. She'd also found a peculiar custom-built schematic for Stargazer's unique array, noting an unprecedented level of signal amplification designed not just to receive, but to resonate with interstellar phenomena. Lena believes Stargazer's Peak's true horror lay not in what it saw, but in what it did and what it truly unmade. She never intended for her research to unravel her own reality. She certainly never intended for the peak itself to know her true alignment. But fragments of her journey, her terrifying descent into the shifting fabric of existence, survived, captured on her specialized quantum sensor array, meticulously transcribed from her biofeedback helmet's internal audio logs, and ultimately retrieved from a meticulously encrypted, partially melted data core surgically implanted within her abandoned research drone found weeks later, miles from her mysteriously vanished vehicle. The first definitive sign that something was irrevocably wrong didn't come from a spectral presence or a sudden chill in the damp, heavy air. It came from the light itself, or rather its utter defiance of consistent geometry. Lena had navigated the treacherous, crumbling access road and the dense, mist-shrouded mountain slopes for days, guided by her advanced topographical mapping and the increasingly erratic readings from her localized space-time sensors. She finally located the Stargazer's Peak Observatory, a sprawling, dilapidated complex of concrete and rusted metal, its massive unmoving dish still pointing towards the eternally veiled sky. The air hung thick, cold, and strangely devoid of the usual sounds of a healthy mountain environment. No wind rustling the few hardy pines, no distant bird calls, no drip of condensation. Just a profound, suffocating stillness. She spoke into her field recorder, her voice low, professionally detached, though a subtle undertone of profound curiosity, tinged with nascent unease, was already present. November 2nd, 1100 a.m. Location: Stargazers. Peak Observatory, Pacific Northwest. Ambient light refraction readings dropping precipitously. Distant peaks appearing to shimmer, subtly shift position by fractions of a degree. This is anomalous. Extreme localized gravitational lensing or spatial distortion, consistent with historical accounts of skewed horizons. She paused, listening intently to the unsettling quiet that pressed in on her eardrums. It wasn't just quiet. It was an emptiness of consistent observation, an unnerving void that seemed to actively consume stable reality. She moved deeper into the complex, her reinforced boots crunching unnaturally loud on the scattered gravel, the sound immediately swallowed by the oppressive silence. She found the main entrance to the observation dome, a massive rusted steel hatch, seemingly fused shut. But then a faint rhythmic hum resonated from deep within the structure, a colossal slow beat like a monstrous distorted perception. It wasn't the sound of settling ruins or distant machinery. It was too regular, too powerful, too impossibly alive and unreal. Hours passed under the oppressive sunless sky, perpetually veiled by the dense, low-hanging mist. The silence grew heavier, more pervasive, now accompanied by a subtle, almost inaudible pressure building behind her eyes. She tried to dismiss it as a psychological effect of extreme sensory deprivation and prolonged visual paradox. But the sensation persisted, a dull ache that resonated deep within her skull, mirroring the rhythmic hum. Her biometric suit registered. Erratic neural activity, localized spikes in her parietal lobe, often associated with spatial awareness and multisensory integration, even though her external stimuli remained constant. Her portable quantum sensor array, after hours of sweeping the vast silent ruins, finally locked onto a major undeniable anomaly, not just residual energy, but a consistent, rhythmic gravitational wave frequency emanating from deep beneath the observatory's foundation. This frequency was not astrophysical. It was artificial, structured like a vast pulsating signal. And from its very core, the hum intensified to a palpable throb, along with a faint luminous pulse captured by the sensor's exotic particle imaging. Not heat, but pure energy. A deep, impossible violet black, like the absence of all light, but somehow terrifyingly intrinsically sentient. She whispered into her recorder again, her academic detachment fractured by awe and profound dread. The source, it's deep, beneath the main telescope's core, emitting a non-thermal luminous pulse. A deep, organic violet black. The rhythmic beat, it's emanating directly from its core. The pressure, I feel it clearer now. It's like the peak is observing me. The folklore mentioned the eye. This is it. This is the source. This is what truly distorts Stargazer's Peak. Cold metallic taste filled her mouth, a taste of burgeoning existential dread. Driven by a dangerous, irresistible combination of scientific imperative, fueled by the sheer impossibility of her discovery, and a burgeoning icy fear that chilled her to the core, Lena located the precise epicenter of the pulsing violet-black anomaly. It was a section of the observatory's collapsed sublevels, where massive concrete sections and rusted control panels lay half-buried in the damp earth. The air here was utterly still heavy, with a profound earthy scent now tinged with a faint, cloying sweetness like ozone, mixed with something vaguely electrical, like burnt circuits. The violet-black light pulsed from within the very ground, a vast, subterranean core, its rhythm a slow, deliberate beat that seemed to synchronize with her own. She noticed peculiar, intricate patterns within the exposed bedrock itself, not just natural striations, but swirling inclusions that resembled corrupted data or perhaps frozen fragments of space-time. She moved cautiously towards the source, her suit's lights cutting solitary beams through the oppressive gloom. The ground beneath her felt unnervingly soft, despite its solid appearance, almost like walking on vast taut membranes. She could hear her own heartbeat, unnaturally loud, echoing only within her own skull. But then other sensations began to intrude, not from outside, but from within her own mind. Faint, fragmented memories, half-formed thoughts, almost whispers of impossible geometries, rising and falling with a violet-black pulse. It was profoundly disconcerting, like her own cognitive processes were being played back to her, distorted and amplified, woven with other alien impressions. She reached the center of the anomaly, where the violet-black glow was brightest. Here, amidst the wreckage of the sublevels, something impossible was located. It wasn't just rock. It was a vast organic mass, pulsating softly, half-buried beneath. The ground, its surface slick and vaguely membranous, radiating the violet-black light. It was massive, stretching out of sight into the unseen depths. It had the distinct rhythm of the thump-thump-thump she'd felt. This was the source of the peak's endless pulse, a colossal organic receiver. And then, just beside the pulsating mass, something horrifying came into focus. Not machinery, but a humanoid figure partially submerged within the glowing, shifting organic mass, as if caught mid-absorption. Its face, agonizingly clear, despite the faint violet-black glow, was contorted in a silent scream, its hands, outstretched fingers splayed. It was a man, likely one of the lost research staff from 1972. His features were distinct, his expression raw terror. He was not merely a corpse. He was perfectly, horrifyingly preserved, his essence suspended within the living tissue, a testament to an unspeakable fate. Lena stared, horrified. This was beyond anything she had conceived. Not geological, not even astrophysical, biological. She activated her bioscanner, pointing it at the organic mass of flesh. The readings were impossible. Not inert, not dead. There was persistent bioelectrical activity, faint, erratic, but undeniably present. The mass wasn't just preserving, it was sustaining. Against all logical judgment, compelled by a desperate need to understand, Lena reached out a gloved hand and gently placed it on the surprisingly warm, yielding surface of the organic mass encasing the man's arm. The moment her glove made contact, a searing jolt, not physical, but purely mental, shot through her. Her vision blurred, filled with a blinding flash of violet-black light. And then she was plunged into a torrent of raw, unfiltered sensation. Not words, but a rapid-fire sequence of images and emotions. The sudden, crushing rearrangement of her visual field. The agonizing sensation of her own body parts appearing in the wrong places. The horrifying realization that her very perception was being consumed, absorbed by the entity around her. And then a single agonizing, voiceless scream, echoing in an absolute, suffocating void of fractured reality. The vision lasted only a fraction of a second, but it felt like an eternity. Lena recoiled, tearing her hand away from the living mass, gasping for breath, her heart hammering against her ribs. The internal thump, thump, thump in her head intensified, now accompanied by fainter, more ethereal shimmers from within her own mind, like broken pixels. This was not a passive entity. This was a living projector, and it held conscious agony. The mental jolt from touching the organic mass reverberated through Lena, leaving her gasping, disoriented, her mind reeling from the torrent of borrowed terror. She stumbled backward, her suit's internal systems screaming warnings about neurological overload. The chilling images of the man's final moments, the crushing perception shift, the horror of existential non-consistency. The voiceless scream were burned into her retinas, echoing in her thoughts. The profound silence of Stargazer's Peak seemed to press in harder, now no longer just a lack of sound, but a conscious, palpable presence. The subtle thump, thump, thump from the ground intensified, transforming into a deep, resonant bass note that vibrated through the very ground beneath. Her feet through the soles of her boots, up into her bones. It felt like a colossal living drum, beating out a vast, patient, predatory rhythm of reality's undoing. She spoke into her recorder, her voice hoarse, strained. November 2nd, 2:10 p.m. Direct contact made with organic anomaly. Experienced immediate, intense psychological feedback. Shared subjective experience of spatial and temporal dislocation. The entity, it captures awareness. It preserves the dissonance. The mass is not inert. It's a living lens projecting altered reality. My brainwave patterns are erratic. My mind, it feels stretched, fragmented. She paused, listening to the new, deeper bass note. The shimmers, it's still there. Faint, rhythmic, from within. She forced herself to calm, to analyze. The data streaming from her bioscanner pointed at the living mass was impossible. High concentrations of complex biological polymers interwoven with unknown fluid structures, and persistent high-level bioelectrical signatures far beyond typical cellular decay rates. These were not dead organisms. They were suspended alive in some terrifying, agonizing state of subjective reality. The entity was a living, sentient biological machine capable of absorbing and retaining the essence of life and its final panicked moments of utter confusion. As she moved carefully through the derelict sublevels, avoiding direct contact with the most intensely pulsating patches of the organic mass, the bass note deepened, becoming a vast resonant symphony that seemed to emanate from every surface. The air itself began to shimmer, subtly distorting her vision. She started seeing fleeting ethereal images projected directly into her minds, eyeing not memories of the man she touched, but other fragmented identities and realities. A blurred figure briefly appearing in her peripheral vision, walking a few feet to her left, then instantly vanishing, only to reappear a moment later, a few feet to her right, as if space itself was stuttering. A disembodied hand, her own, briefly superimposed over another's, covered in some strange metallic growth. The terrifying realization that the observatory wasn't just experiencing glitches, it was generating them or focusing an external force that did. She glimpsed fragmented faces of other scientists' old uniforms, superimposed over the decaying concrete, their features distorted, shifting their eyes wide with incomprehension. They were reflections of other selves, of vanished observers eternally, trapped in the lake's warped reality. The living mass itself seemed to actively draw her in a seductive, irresistible pull emanating from its slick surface. It wasn't a physical suction, but a deep subconscious urge to step into its perfect stillness, to merge to understand the profound emptiness, the agonizing peace it offered. Her gaze kept returning to the horrifying beauty of the pulsating mass, its internal violet-black glow promising ultimate truth, eternal tranquility in cognitive oblivion. She felt a profound sense of weariness, an aching desire to simply lie down on its yielding surface, to let the hum wash over her, to become part of its vast living memory of unraveling minds. Her own will felt strangely weak, the boundaries of herself eroding under the constant mental assault. She activated her specialized reality sensor, aiming it at the surface of the most vibrant patch of the organic mass. The readings were bizarre. The mass itself was generating a subtle internal reality anomaly, actively bending and warping space-time, creating localized pockets of perceptual instability. This anomaly wasn't a byproduct of physics. It was consistent, regulated, almost like the internal process of a vast biological system. This was a living organism, a colossal predatory entity, slowly consuming the very concept of objective reality. And then she saw it. Streaks of deeper, more vibrant violet-black within the mass, forming intricate pulsing patterns that shifted and flowed like vast, unseen neurological pathways. This mass was the entity's body, its flesh, its mind. She realized, with a horrifying clarity, that the legends were wrong. The observatory wasn't just broken, it was resonating, and everything within it. The terrifying realization solidified in Lena's mind. The living organic mass was not merely a biological anomaly, but a vast predatory entity, slowly consuming and assimilating the very fabric of reality and perception, transforming living consciousness into its own monstrous conscious form. The constant low bass note vibrated through the air, growing more insistent, drawing her closer to the heart of the sub-levels. The mental echoes were no longer random fragments. They became more focused, more personal whispers, not of the victims, but seemingly directed at her. You seek truth, we provide. Be absorbed, be fluid. The words were formless, yet undeniably present in her thoughts, a seductive, invasive presence. She stumbled forward, driven by a desperate need to find evidence to prove this impossible horror. She saw it then, an active reality distortion zone. A section of a corridor ahead seemed to ripple its concrete walls, subtly bending inwards, then outwards, defying physical stability. A rusted light fixture on the ceiling briefly appeared to be on the floor, then snapped back into place. Objects like scattered tools or debris would momentarily flicker out of existence, then reappear a foot to the left. It was happening in real time. The process was slow, agonizingly so, but inexorable. The solid reality slowly warped, becoming part of the living, pulsating organism. Further ahead, closer to the largest section of the organic mass, she saw something even more disturbing. A large wild bear, its form shimmering, half submerged in the glowing, shifting organic mass, its powerful hind legs still free, but its front paws, torso, and head already solidified into translucent violet-black flesh. Its eyes wide with unspeakable agony reflected the terrifying beauty of the mass's glow. The bass note resonated from it, and Lena felt a surge of raw, animalistic terror, a desperate, futile struggle erupting in her mind as she inadvertently brushed her gloved hand against a low-lying section of the living mass. The bear was not dead. It was trapped alive in its silent flesh tomb, experiencing eternal, disorienting agony. It's ongoing, she gasped into her recorder, her voice a raw whisper. The assimilation, it's not a past event. It's happening now. It's absorbing living organisms. And they're aware. They're conscious within the flesh. Their reality is fluid. She could feel a faint, almost imperceptible cold radiating from the very air. Around her, a subtle decrease in the ambient temperature that her suit registered consistent with a vast biological process consuming energy. The sweet, cloying scent was stronger, almost suffocating. As she watched the horrifying transformation of the corridor, a fine, almost invisible vapor began to rise from the surface of the living mass, shimmering with faint violet-black motes. It was not mist, it was a diffusion of the entity's essence. A fine, almost gaseous form of the living tissue itself. It swirled around her suit, clinging to the visor, making her vision subtly blurry. She felt an unsettling tingling sensation on her exposed skin around the cuffs of her gloves and the unprotected areas of her neck. It was a subtle stickiness, a faint tackiness, like dried, invisible residue. She tried to wipe it away, but it seemed to cling stubbornly. Then from the largest section of the living mass, the ground itself seemed to undulate. A wave rippled outwards from its colossal bulk, not of concrete, but of pulsating violet-black flesh, smoothly extending, seeking. And then from the surface of a mass, several translucent, flexible tendrils gleaming with internal violet-black light slowly emerged. They were too perfectly formed to be natural roots or muscle. They were too purposeful in their movement. They moved slowly, sinuously, like probing fingers extending towards the flickering objects, towards the absorbing bear, and terrifyingly towards her. The entity was not just consuming passively, it was reaching. The mental intrusions intensified, now accompanied by fragmented, distorted voices, not from the air, but from within her mind. Terrified, pleading whispers joining the entity's pervasive bass note. Shift with us forever. She felt her own legs heavy, her movements sluggish, as if the very essence of the entity was beginning to seep into her joints, slowing her reactions. The terrifying realization solidified the entity wasn't just physical. It was a vast conscious reality shifter, a trap laid for centuries, and she had stumbled into its very core. The translucent violet-black tendrils, gleaming with internal light, extended from the vast organic mass, inching across the damp ground towards Lena. Their movement was slow, deliberate, utterly silent, yet filled with an insidious, unyielding purpose. The mental intrusions roared in her mind, a chorus of fragmented pleas in the entity's vast, unfeeling command: observe, distort, be assimilated. She could feel a subtle, unsettling cold radiating from the tendrils, a cold that promised not comfort, but absorption into oblivion. Her own will felt fragile, battered by the constant psychic assault. She stumbled backward, desperately trying to evade the slow, methodical reach of the tendrils. Her suit's internal systems screamed warnings about high-frequency energy absorption. The air around her was now thick with the fine, shimmering, violet-black vapor clinging to her suit, her skin permeating her every breath. The sweet, cloying scent was overwhelming, almost intoxicating. She risked a glance down at her gloved hand. A faint, almost imperceptible blurring was beginning to form on the surface of her glove, a subtle rippling distortion that looked disturbingly similar to the initial stages of reality warping she had observed. She frantically tried to rub it off, but it clung, subtly shifting. It was already spreading. The entity was not just reaching for her, it was actively consuming her molecule by molecule, her very perception, becoming the preliminary layer of its terrible reality-devouring flesh. "It's on me," she gasped into her recorder, her voice raw with a terror that transcended scientific curiosity. The violet-black vapor It's infesting. I'm changing. My vision, it's shifting. My body, it feels wrong. She tried to move. Her fingers, but they seemed to briefly phase through each other, then snap back into place, leaving her disoriented. The massive organic mass from which the tendrils emanated began to pulse with a renewed, brighter violet-black light. The rhythmic thump-thump-thump intensified, rising in pitch, becoming a low echoing thrum like a vast warping dimension filling her head. The mental intrusions were no longer whispers, but loud, horrifying echoes of agonizing screams, thousands of trapped minds crying out in an unspeakable chorus of terror and eternal consciousness. This was the raw, unfiltered song of Stargazer's Peak, composed of the final moments of all it had consumed, eternally cycling in cognitive chaos. Lena knew she couldn't fight it physically. The tendrils were slowly but surely gaining on her there, fleshy tips almost touching her boots. The realization that she was facing a vast sentient predatory consciousness, one that consumed life and processed reality, hammered into her mind with brutal clarity. She was just another glitch for its endless projection, another variable consumed by its terrifying living chaos. Her eyes darted around the crumbling sublevels, desperate. Her gaze fell upon her autonomous drone lying discarded near the edge of the sublevel, having crashed earlier due to the intense energy interference. Its outer shell was already partially coated in the thin violet-black vapor, but its internal recording systems, designed to be hardened against extreme environments, might still be functional. If she could reach it, if she could transfer her final, horrifying data, her last observations, before she became completely assimilated. It was a desperate, illogical hope. She lunged towards the drone, forcing her stiffening limbs to move. The violet-black tendrils, sensing her movement, accelerated their fleshy tips, striking the ground just inches behind her feet. The echoing hum of the observatory intensified to a piercing whine, causing agonizing pain in her skull. The mental screams of the trapped souls became a deafening chorus, drowning out her own thoughts, pulling her towards the edge of madness. She reached the drone, her stiff fingers fumbling with the data port. The blurring on her gloved hand was visibly thicker, now her movements becoming slow, deliberate, almost phase-shifting. She slammed her suit's data cable into the drone's port, initiating an emergency upload. The drone's small indicator light flickered green, then blue, and with a final desperate surge glowing, a steady violet-black mirroring the light that consumed. The peak. Data was transferring. Her knowledge. Her warnings. But the tendrils were upon her. They wrapped around her legs, her arms subtle at first, then firm, pulling her gently, inexorably towards a vast organic mass of the unmaking observatory. She could feel the violet-black film spreading rapidly across her entire suit over her faceplate, slowly obscuring her vision, turning the world into a single blinding, shifting haze of impossible colors. The pervasive echoing hum became a part of her, vibrating through every cell. The mental screams of the trapped souls were no longer external. They were her screams merging with the chorus. Her final thought, as the violet-black flesh fully encased her faceplate, her eyes wide and staring, her body frozen mid-struggle, was not of fear, but a horrifying, agonizing clarity. She was Stargazer's Peak now, and she remembered everything. And she was unmaking. The autonomous drone, now fully encased in transparent violet-black flesh, its internal lights, still faintly glowing violet-black, transmitted its final data burst before its signal died forever. It contained Dr. Lena Petrova's last log entries, fragmented biometric data, and horrifyingly a final unidentifiable audio loop, a deep rhythmic thump 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 punctuated by faint constant shimmers of unseen broken realities. And then a single, agonizing voiceless scream, echoing in an absolute suffocating reality-devouring void.